Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to another edition of WPL Paint Along Afternoons. I'm so glad you could join me. Today we're going to work on an acrylic still life featuring some seasonal fruit. It's the time of year for eating peaches and pears and plums and cherries, so this painting sort of commemorates that. Before we begin, I'm going to go over sort of my paint equipment that I have here. I have my paint kit. Today I will be using white, titanium white, cobalt blue, vermilion, lemon yellow, and if I run out, I may have to use this cadmium yellow and a viridian green. If your paints are a little bit different, of course your results may look a little bit different, but that's the fun of painting. I also have this, my canvas today is somewhat oversized. I wanted to keep it small because painting larger canvases takes more paint and more time. So I thought I'd keep it a little bit smaller, and I've done that by marking off the area with tape. So later on I can peel the tape off, I could give it a black border to make it stand out, and then I could hang it on the wall just like this. So. Because I'm working wet on wet, I have a spray bottle, and I'm going to take my canvas and I'm just going to spray it a little bit and give it a wipe with a piece of paper towel. This is going to prevent the paint from drying out too quickly. So it just keeps a little bit damp. I also have my pallet, an old repurposed cutting board here. I have some paper towels or rags if you would prefer those. And I have my paintbrushes here. And some water for cleaning those paintbrushes. Okay. A quick word on brush care and some cleanup tips. For brushes, what I do is when I'm done painting with them, I sort of swirl them in the water just like this until there's not any obvious paint stuck on them. And then I just sort of take a paper towel and I dab them like this, and that, letting them stay a little bit damp, and that will keep the paint from drying on them before I go give them a more thorough wash at the end of the session. The other thing to consider cleaning is your palette. I'd like to keep things like heavy metal, poisonous cadmium out of our water system as much as possible. So when I'm done painting, I will take my spray brush, I will spray my palette a couple times, wipe it off with a paper towel, and throw that paper towel in the garbage. If you're using a rag, you can wipe it off with a rag and just put the rag aside to dry. And then acrylic paint dries as a hard plastic. It doesn't come off afterwards. So then you can stick the rag into the wash and wash it and see how much comes off. Okay. So let's get started. Just going to tilt my camera here a little bit. There we go. So you can see I've done a couple versions of this too. I think I prefer this one. There's just one thing I'm not quite pleased about it with, so there will be one small change, but we can go over that later. You'll see it happening. To begin, I'm going to mix up the color that's going to be my black. Now, if you've attended any of my previous paint along sessions, you'll know that I don't like to paint with pure black. I like to mix my own imperfect black because that's more visually interesting than pure black. So I'm going to mix up a very dark blue, starting with putting a little bit of blue on my canvas, or on my, sorry, not my canvas, my palette there, and some yellow, and a bit of red. And I'm going to mix those together and see if they get me the color I'm aiming for here. I'm hoping to get sort of a darker blue here. The result's a little bit more purpley than I like. So I'm going to add more blue. There we go. That's more the color I was thinking of. Although I have to admit, when I made this the last time, it was darker. I used a different brand of cobalt blue last time, and it seems to have made a very big difference in the color. So I'm going to add a little bit of ultramarine blue to this. You can add black. Go ahead. I take back my previous words. Sometimes black is useful. I'm trying to get sort of a dark navy color. And again, this just demonstrates sort of the different issues that can arise when you're using different types of paint. All right. So I'm going to call that done. This is going to be sort of the black color for our painting. It's also going to be the color of our sketch or our underpainting. So I'm going to start with this brush, and I'm going to find the middle of the canvas here. So on this side, right about here, just a dot. And same thing on this side, right about here. Eventually, I'll cut those across to make my middle line. But before we do that, I'm going to put the fruit in the middle so that I don't have to draw a line through my fruit. So I'm going to start with the pear. I'm going to put, where should I put that stem? About the middle, right about there. All right, so that's the stem for my pear. Working down from there. I'm going to draw sort of the top of my pear shape. And a little bit down this side. And I want sort of the bottom of the middle bulge to be kind of where that line's going to intersect, where that halfway point's going to come down. So trying to keep things in proportion like that. Don't go too far. We don't want to run into the peach, which is going to be right about here. That's going to be the stem for the peach. Peach is a little bit more circular than the pear, obviously. So we're basically going to draw a big circle here. It doesn't have to be perfect. We'll perfect or work on making it a little cleaner when we do the painting itself, but for now. And peaches have that little crease in them. I'll just give that a hint there. All right. The next piece of fruit I'm going to draw is the plum. The plum is over here-ish. It's sort of an oval-shaped fruit. And about over here, I'm going to put the cherry. All right. Bring that pear down. Maybe paint a little stem for the cherry here. Plums also have this funny crease in them, so I'm gonna sketch that in a little bit. And adjust as I go. And now that I have my fruit, I can complete this line. And there we are. So, we're going to do the plum to start, because it's sort of in the foreground here. And I've already got a plummish color mixed up. This is the sort of the early failed version of the dark color I was making. But it's a pretty good plum color for plums. I'm going to add just a hint of red and a little bit of blue. Make it a little bit more purpley. Don't need a lot. I always forget how strong this red is. That's a little bit better. I'm also going to need a little bit of white, so I'm going to get that ready and stick that on here. And I'll want a second brush in a minute. But now that I've got my plum color, I'm going to put it on the plum. I'm just going to cover the whole thing completely. I'll have to remember where some of the details are. Like where that little crease is. So I'm keeping those in mind. Okay, I'm going to get a clean brush, dip it into the white, and I'm going to make a couple highlights over here. And then a couple more highlights over here, remembering that crease that's in the plum. And this is the wet on wet technique, so I'm just taking, it's mostly a pure white. It's getting less pure as I sort of go back and forth between the palette and the canvas. But mixing a pure white for the plum. Pure white onto the plum, and then letting the wet paint on the canvas already kind of do some of my work for me. Okay, and if I was thinking I'd done something a little too light, I have still my brush with the plum color on it, and I could use that. Plums can be a little bit shiny. I'm going to make sure there's a little bit more shine on here near the top too. All right. And this is already pretty dark, but if I want to include more of that dark shadow color, I can fill it in just along the bottom here. You can see I've taken my brush I was using for the plum color and just straight on put it in our mixed up black color. And maybe also just a little bit more around here, that will. There. So there's my plum. I'm going to clean these brushes off now. And move on to the cherry. There we go. So for the cherry, I'm going to grab my red again and put a little bit on the palette. Now that's quite quite red for a cherry. But I happen to have this mixture over here that was a failed attempt at making a plum color. And I'm going to add a little bit of that in just to make it slightly deeper color for the cherry. There we go. When I have the color I'm happy with, again, I'm going to just stick it right on there and fill in the whole fruit. I'm going to try to leave that stem, but if you go over it, we can always paint it back in later. We'll touch it up. So there's my cherry. And I still have some white over here. So I'm going to take, again, a little bit of that pure white and go around the edge of the cherry here. And it's going to blend on the canvas. To give me a lovely cherry color. Make all these interesting highlights. Maybe I want to mix this in a little bit more. And there we have a cherry. And once again, I'm going to do a dark color by taking a bit of that, again, the black color we made at the very beginning. I'm just going to sort of swipe it along the back here. Again, it will blend in with the already wet red color. And a tiny dot right here. And there we are. I'm getting paint on my elbow. That's okay. 2 down. Clean the brushes again. The next fruit we're going to do is the peach. So I've cleaned my brushes again. I'm still using my round brushes. And I have some red, but I'm definitely going to need more yellow. So add a bit of yellow onto my canvas. I've got some red there. It might not be enough, so I'll add just a tad more. And I might need more yellow than that too. There we go. Keeping in mind that the red is quite strong, vermilion red is quite strong, and lemon yellow is not nearly that strong. So I'm going to start with the yellow on my peach. And I'm going to do, just like I have over here in the example, on the crease and around sort of the edges, I'm going to put more yellow and then reddish on top because peaches have that two-tone thing going for them. And if your yellow is like mine and it's really not doing anything over top of the underpainting, that's okay. We're going to darken those edges anyway later on. With some shadow. And some of you might know that I like underpaintings that show through a little bit. Call it my style, if you will. All right, so there's the yellow. Now the yellow and red do mix a little bit to create that peach color. So I'm not going to clean my brush. I'm just going to go straight over and start working on the red and see if there's enough strength in the yellow to kind of make the red go orangish. It's kind of an orangish red to begin with, so. And I shouldn't be surprised, the vermilion seems to be completely overpowering the yellow, so I'm going to mix in a little bit more yellow. I'm going to draw some stripes. Peaches have a couple stripes. And I'm going to mix up some very orange, so a strong orange color, with a lot more yellow, and start applying that to sort of some of the places where I want the yellow and the red to blend in a little bit and be orangish. Don't know if it's going to happen so well, but okay. So cleaning my brush, we're going to go now. I'm out of yellow and out of red, and I feel like I'm going to need both of those for the next little bit. So I'm going to grab a little bit more of both. Now the shadows around this area, right? Just like I've got over here, there's shadows sort of around the bottom of the peach. So I'm going to mix a little bit of the yellow with a little bit of our blackish color. Now, why am I not mixing it totally on the canvas this time? Because I think it's going to be too strong and it'll look just like I've put underpainting on again. So there's still going to be some mixing happening, as you see. But it's not quite so extreme, and so it still looks like a shadow. If you want it a little bit stronger, you add a little bit more. And now you can go into down here. I'm happy to add sort of the full strength. And there we go. Now peaches tend to be less shiny than cherries or plums. So the red, or the white highlights on the red are going to be muted, right? They're going to be not nearly as strong. And they're going to take up sort of a broader space to reflect the fuzzy nature of the peaches. And again, I'm blending on the palette this time, not going straight with the white onto the peach, because that's gonna, if I did that, I would end up with sharp highlights that look shiny, not broader highlights that look fuzzy. So. I think I've actually almost exhausted this white, so I may need to add more onto my palette soon. So you can see that mixing on the palette first and starting with a more muted color, you can still see some of that wet on wet mixing effect that you get here, but it's a little bit more subdued. And that's what gives it a fuzzy look. Or at least a matte look. And there we are. There's our peach. So clean off my brush. And moving on to the pear. So for the pear, I'm going to use my green. And I'm going to mix up the base color I'd like to have for my pear. So I'm going to start adding yellow to it, because I think just on its own the Viridian green is too strong. In fact, it is quite overpowering the yellow again. So let's see if I try the opposite. I'll mix the green into the yellow. And that seems to be giving me a much nicer effect. Slightly too strong, or slightly too vibrant. I'm going to tone it down by mixing in a little bit of this brown here and just a touch of this orange up here. We don't have neon glowing pears then. So here's the base color for the pear. I'm gonna paint it on over here. little bit over there. And I'm leaving spots where I'd like to have a slightly yellower tone. Pears are also, you know, a little bit two-toned at times. So I'd like to show that. By adding more yellow. So I'm not going to clean my brush. So the brush still has green on it, but I'm going to dip it straight into the yellow and paint the yellow on. And the green and yellow on my brush are going to mix straight on the canvas. So there we have a nice little bit of yellow there. I'm going to take my brush and mix it in with some black. Again, I haven't washed it. I'm just going to go dive straight in, put it down where I want shades. And again, this is our made up black, not our real black, not a true black, I should say. Just mix it in where I want there to be shadow. This corner down here is going to be quite dark. Now, hopefully you haven't done this, but I think I have run my pear right into my plum. So I'm going to try to get a brush here to reestablish that line. So brush covered in that dark black-ish color again. And I need just a tab of white and some of that plum color again. And just go over very slightly. There we go. Correcting as I go. Now pears are also slightly shiny. So I'm going to clean my other brush, the one that had all the green from the pear on it. I'm going to take a bit more white. And my brush is slightly wet. I'm going to thin the white on my brush with a little bit of the water that's already on my brush just by sort of dabbing it on the palette. So you can see I've got sort of a milky looking color. That will still mix in with what's on the canvas here, so I can sort of tap it in, but it's going to be less strong. So subtler shadow again, or subtler highlight, I should say. Not a super shiny pear, just a little. can mix in a little bit of yellow. And there we are. Now I've left the stems out until this point. I'm going to put them in using a detail brush, so like this, and the colors I have left on my palette. So I have a little bit of this greeny yellow left. I'm going to use that for a cherry stem. A fine brush, and just delicately trace over the cherry stem. I'm going to need a little bit of brown. That, so I can get that by mixing this brown color, a little bit of red, a little bit of yellow, until I get something like what I might want for a stem. I'm just going to slightly touch that in. Just hint at it. Don't need to paint the whole thing, because the imagination will fill in a good portion of it for you. Just a couple dots will do you. Gonna add a little bit of green on it here. Just hint at it there. Maybe add a touch of brown to that cherry stem. And there we go. That's all I need to do for that. Okay. My black color is quickly drying out, so I'm going to give that a bit of a spray with my mister there, because I still need it for sort of the white tablecloth. So I need a white tablecloth, so I'm going to put a larger blob of titanium white on there. And I'm using my flat brush because it's going to give me the most coverage. I'm going to start by painting just around the area of the fruit, and making it thick, because we're going to use that wet on wet technique to draw the shadows of the fruit here. So not too thick. I should maybe not emphasize the thickness. We definitely want it there. Tiny bit right there, corner of the brush. All right. And we're going to create the shadows by dipping our white brush into our black color. I'm going to mix it ever so slightly, so I got a bit of a grayish color. I'm going to apply that grayish color just to around where the edge, bottom edge of the peach is. We sort of have the light in this picture coming down from almost right on top. So you imagine where the shadow would be with the light coming from on top, and it wouldn't be very big, but there would be a little bit of shadow underneath. So there we go. Same with the bottom of the plum. So blue-gray color under here. And you can't see any shadow for the pear, but the cherry's gonna have one. Small one. And mixing up this gray. There's gonna be a little bit right in here. Using the corner of my brush to fill that in. You could use a detail brush if you wanted to. Mixing a stronger gray, moving in closer to emphasize the shadow in some parts. I want it to be quite strong here. If it looks like I'm reshaping the plum, that's because I am. I got too close a little bit up here, and now I have to sort of adjust. Okay. So I've got the basic shadows now. I'm going to clean my brush ever so slightly. Not ever so slightly. It's going to be mostly clean, still with a little bit of white on it. I'm going to move again from those shadows, painting a little bit outward, touching on the shadow color, the gray, sort of blend it in a little bit. Now, the rest of the tablecloth, whatever it is going to be white, but it's not going to be 100% pure white. It's going to kind of look like it. But you're going to notice that as I paint, I'm going to be touching on other colors that are left on my palette. So, sure, this is white, but I'm going to just touch, there, see, tap my brush into something that's not completely dry. There we go. And just a touch of some other color on there. So faint, you'd still call it white if you didn't, know it was there. But these touches of color, slight as they are, add just a bit of variation to the white and make it a little bit more visually interesting. So that was a little bit of yellow. And back here near the edge, I'll put some gray. Even get this spot here. Try not to crowd out the cherry though. Going back over. Now working on this corner, touch of green in there. Gonna get my brush ever so slightly wet again. Just makes things last a little bit longer. Pull the paint a little bit farther. And again, we're working on white, so if it's a tiny bit washed out, it won't really matter. Tab more. Try not to be too strong with the blue or the green. Titanium white is a very, very strong color pigment. It's good at drowning out other things and fading out other colors. If you ever have a painting where you really don't want the white to fade your colors and make things look a little bit washed out, if you really want to preserve the vibrancy of the colors, try using zinc white. It takes about 3-4 times as much to get the same shades to come out, but the colors stay extremely vibrant even though they're a little lighter. It's a very interesting effect to see it in actually working. So here we are, I'm adding on different colors. And you'll notice I'm not so worried about staying in the lines here, and that's because I've got the tape later on. I'll just pull the tape off and everything will be within the lines again. You'll notice that as I mix in those little bits of color I mentioned earlier, that you see me adding in a little bit of yellow or whatever, I'm doing it on a back and forth or a horizontal stroke, and that's going to make it look long and horizontal, and it's going to emphasize the fact that the table is flat, is a horizontal surface. And there we go. So now we have everything completed except the background. In this painting, I made the background blue, and I don't know if I liked that. I think having sort of the dark blue outlines, which I liked, plus the blue background was too much cold. So I'm going to make the foreground, or the background rather, I'm going to make the background red this time. So unfortunately, I've got a tiny bit of red left on my canvas, or on my, not my canvas, my palette, sorry. I'm going to start by putting yellow around the edge of the fruit, much like I put white around it here, just to sort of make it pop a little bit. And I'll gradually work out on getting redder and darker as I go. But for now, a little bit of yellow around the edge of the fruit. Even around the cherry stem. Carefully go, try not to Get it on the cherry stem. There we go. And now I'm going to start on that red. Now again, I'm still expecting this to be a fairly strong red. It's probably not going to mix in too much with the yellow. But just enough. To make the fruit sort of a bright spot, a lighter spot in the middle of the painting. Make it stand out. Better get over here before this part dries. Need a bit more yellow, I think. And now moving out to the true red. I think there's enough space on here for me to just sort of put it on there directly. It's a strong red color. I'm not worried about overpowering it or overpowering anything else with it. Or overpowering it with anything else. As we get over to the corners, I'm actually going to start mixing in, I don't have any more. Oh, I do. Tiny bit more of that dark color. Mix the dark color and the red together. If you don't have anything that's dry on your painting or on your palette, then you can mix some up for yourself. Basically, you'd take the red and you'd add a little bit of your blue. And a little bit of yellow to it. And that would give you a less intense and slightly darker version of the red that you're using. I'm using the green from my pear up to make it darker over here. Just going to dip the tip of my brush in the water and see if that doesn't help me fill in these tiny holidays. Or little white spots. Down here they don't bug me so much, but up here I want a nice thick coat of color. I'm doing the same thing again. More red. More dark color. And I'm using short brush strokes because I'd like to, even though I'm sort of blending colors out, I'd like to maintain the energy and motion of the picture even. If you look at a Vincent van Gogh painting, you'll notice that he makes the whole thing move, mostly just by using his brush strokes and color choices. And there we are. I'm going to clean my brush. And I could wait until the paint dries to pull these off, but I think so you can see the effect. I'll do it now. Just have to be careful not to smear any paint onto the canvas because they are still wet. My hands might get some, so be aware too. No, I got the edge. It's okay. I can paint over the edge easy. And there we are. There's our summer fruit scene with a cool dark blue underpainting and a fiery warm red background. I stick this down. You can sort of see what the different background color. Pull it up. That's there. So we have blue painting and the red painting. So you can choose whichever one you prefer and go for it. And if it didn't quite turn out for you, I'm sorry. I hope you'll go back and give it a try. As you can see, I've done multiple paintings of this already, 3 times. So thanks for joining me. Have a great afternoon, and we'll see you next time. Take care.